talked about paradigm revolutions from a research perspective. So if you go into the philosophy of science, there are different paradigms, and most researchers here know that they do research from particular paradigms. Now, what Kuhn said in 1962 is actually happening right now in terms of how we are transitioning to a different paradigm or a different society. We talk a lot about the fourth industrial revolution, that we are transitioning to that fourth industrial revolution. It means we are coming from somewhere. Now, when you think about the concept of work, how the factory system was created in the 18th, 19th century, that we are still using up to now in terms of how organizations are designed. The question is, are those organizations that you're working in, are they designed to be in the digital society? If you take an event such as COVID, 2019 to 2020, 21, we sort of moved to a situation where we were embracing digital technology and working remotely without, going into physical spaces. But what you then now see is people going back to face-to-face. In other words, we are almost abandoning where we had moved to. We are going backwards in terms of, for instance, face-to-face instruction or even how we work. Many companies are telling their employees, you need to come back to work. Is that progressive? Or is it retrogressive from a digital transformation perspective? So we see that even though there's a paradigm change, we see human beings still going back to what they know best or what they are comfortable with. Again, this is typical of us as organisms or as human beings. We like what we are comfortable with. We struggle with change. And so this affects how we adopt or how technology diffuses in the society. Now, what Kuhn was saying is that when there is a new change, such as what we are now witnessing, such resistance is inevitable. But the world moves on whether you resist or not. And so we sense that with the coming of artificial intelligence, definitely there is a move towards a new form of society, which is highly digital in nature, and that may require us to also design societal systems that are relevant for that society. The old systems that we have, whether it is the structure of organizations that we currently have, really cannot fit in that society. If I pose the question, how many hours do you spend in a day? And if you spend 10, 14 hours, the question is, whatever you're looking at on the screen can be done by AI. Everything that is on the screen implies that that information can be understood by the computer and therefore can be done by AI. And the question is, what then is supposed to be your work? Again, if you read what Kuhn said in 1962, his emphasis in research was for discoveries. We need to discover new things. Not the old form of research that is based on hypothesis testing. The way we are practicing it right now. We use past data, we basically test to confirm whether those ideas are valid or not. Now the question is, if the society that we are transitioning to, we don't know it, we don't understand it very well, how do we use old models of thinking to understand the digital society? And so Kuhn was basically questioning our practice of science then, that it may not be fit when we are transitioning to a new paradigm where we don't understand the environment, but we are faced with many, many dilemmas, many challenges that we need to address. And we think that with this new innovation, it is possible to come up with new ideas, new innovations that are completely different from the past, because the future, in terms of the digital society, is maybe a very different environment as we know it. I've given a few references there. Now, when you come to the idea of AI, just think about the environment that we face every day. We talk about big data now. We talk about, of course, the AI is based on machine learning. We train those AI agents, we give it data, they seek to understand the data and learn from the data and help us to understand the world. So we model the world based on past data. All machine learning is based on past data. So again, the question is, the data that we're using, is it the right form of data to train these models that help us to understand the world? Because the models are basically for understanding our world to help us solve problems. So we think that this AI is now providing that pipeline that allows us to try and understand and model the world in a better way. That's why we talk about big data. Now the question is, as you've heard since you came, where is Africa, where is South Africa in terms of creating the pipeline for us to model our worlds in Africa? There are many questions that have been raised whether what we are getting from elsewhere is relevant for our context. Now, if you look at, for example, the top seven companies in the world, tech companies such as Apple, Google, etc., all of them are American companies. They're not European. And in fact, Europe was complaining last year that the digital society is actually controlled by American firms. And so from a governance perspective, Europe had to come up with the regulation in order to control the power that these companies have in the European society. What are we doing about, what about from an African perspective? Are we ready to give in and say that, for our digital infrastructure, in other words, our role in the digital society, we are handing it over to Facebook, or you're handing it over to Google. Not the Chinese who are building the roads, physical roads. But in the online world, we also have other companies, particularly American companies, that are controlling the infrastructure for the artificial intelligence. So if you scroll down, if you look at what Europe is trying to do right now, they have come up with various regulations to try and understand the evolution of AI in their society. So for instance, the Digital Services Act, the one that you see in the middle, really focuses on controlling the 7 or the top 15 tech companies of the world. And those are American firms. Most of them are American firms. And they also came up with various, we have the GDPR, we also have P2B, and they're also coming up with specific regulation related to artificial intelligence. We tend to see many African countries following the European model. After Europe has come up with something, then we use it as best practice to come up with our own regulations. Again, the question is, are we just copying and pasting? And are they relevant for our context? To what extent do we interrogate these best practices so that they are applicable to the context that we find ourselves in? And so if you look at some of these regulations, their emphasis is to try and ensure that these AI systems that are being built are user-friendly, and the people who are using them actually understand them. So we talk about explainability. And so explainability, therefore, they say is about the user. Those models that you're building, for instance, on ChatGPT, many of you, I'm sure, are experimenting with ChatGPT, creating your own GPTs to do various tasks. Those, as you build them, where is the data sitting? And how is the data being used? Who has access to that data? Who is benefiting from that data that you are using to create the GPTs? That's why there's a question about, is Africa building their own pipelines for AI? So when we see initiatives such as the one by Professor Marivate of UP, it is encouraging. It implies that there's an interest in ensuring that we evolve our own AI infrastructure in different parts of Africa so that our own context can be understood from in this digital context. So explainability is key if you look at how regulations are emerging in different parts of the world. And in fact, in September of this year, some of you may be aware the United Nations will be talking about creating a governing system similar almost to the United Nations Security Council, but for the digital society. So it already emphasizes to you the kind of importance that is attached to the environment that we are transitioning to, as well as the governance structures that are required in order to make sure that AI works for all. And from a global perspective, it's therefore required to design a governance structure that can help us to understand it. We are simply, a governance structure is basically for controlling the system that we have created, those AI systems that we actually created. Now, but for us to understand AI, we need to understand the history of these technologies. Immediately you talk about a system has a history. So from, again, many of you are in, for instance, programmers, software development. We know that those systems have a life cycle. So the whole approach in the system's life cycle is we know there's a beginning, eventually it has to die. And even if you think about the concept of the system's life cycle, again, we develop them from our own understanding of ourselves. We know that we also eventually die once we can't survive in the environment. An old person eventually can't fit in the environment. The environment is moving probably faster than that person, and eventually we die, even though we don't like talking about it very much. But that concept is with us. We know it, that there's always a life cycle in any system, whether it is a computer system that you've built or even living organisms. We know that there's a life cycle that they go through. So if you look at AI did not therefore start in 2015. We have been transitioning to an AI world since as early as the 1930s, 1940s, when the concept of system and cybernetics was being, many people from different disciplines were thinking about it from a cybernetic perspective. So if you look at the meaning of cybernetics, from which you now talk about cyberspace or cyber-physical systems, it was emerging in the 1940s, particularly after the Second World War, when when people asked themselves, why were we fighting? And so you find that many governance systems were created after the Second World War, including how we think about systems, such as the technical systems that we talk about now. So that just gives you where we are coming from. If you look at the factory paradigm as well as the cooperation paradigm, that is what we are still using in terms of how we create our enterprises. We talk about the cooperation. A company is a corporation. But the actual meaning of a corporation is a community. If you look at the original meaning of what a corporation is. So the question is that model of the corporation still working? Because we are still using it, and yet, since the 1970s, we already transitioned to a different form of paradigm, what we are calling the network paradigm. So if you see the internet as a network of computers, these ideas were coming in the 1970s. And in fact, the people who are actually called the computer generation are those who are born in the 60s and the 70s. For those who are young here, I don't know what to call you, maybe the AI generation. But actually, the computer generation are those who are born in the 60s and the 70s. So we need to understand the history, because a system has its history, so that you see where it is going. And even when you talk about a concept such as digital transformation, if you look at digital transformation as a societal driver, it's not really about the technology. It's that this is happening in our society now. Many people are talking about digital transformation, and there are different scenarios. There are different futures of digital transformation. It's not one future. And the future of digital transformation is partly influenced by the governance system that you find in a country or in a particular region or in a particular continent. All right, so Professor Borzovic actually outlined 4 different futures of digital transformation. In other words, when you're talking about digital transformation, you have to understand which country are you in and how is that the structure of governance in that country influencing how digital transformation programs are actually carried out. So if you are in China, they will say it is authoritarianism, digital authoritarianism. So there's a way they handle their programs. If you are in America, they will talk more about digital democracy, but it's not. It's actually more of a digital oligopoly that you find in countries such as the US. There's a lot of power that is vested in a few firms that are supported by government in using various incentives. So when Facebook goes into a country, the government is actually behind Facebook. They may not be directly showing support, but they do use, economic interests to actually project their agenda to the rest of the world. So digital transformation needs to be looked at also from this perspective. You need to understand that this is the type of governance system we have in the country, and therefore this is how, when you see how policies are enacted, definitely that influences how we initiate this project. In the next slide, I just give several examples of how different companies have been the ones that are dominant in the digital society. They started a long time ago. Intel was created in 1968, and many of you have computers that are still written Intel inside. That's the kind of dominance we're talking about. I mean, I don't see any computer written South Africa inside. It's mostly Intel inside or another one from China, etc. So from a technology layer perspective, we have to ask ourselves, where are we competing in that society? Who is providing that backbone infrastructure that we want to be proud of, even from an AI perspective? So these are questions that we need to ask ourselves as we move into the digital society. Now, the other thing I want to emphasize is some of the technology drivers that are influencing AI. For example, the concept of edge computing. There's a very good summary document which has come from the IEEE Society, which was based on research that was done by over 30 academics from different universities, where they are projecting the kind of technologies that we are supposed to, I'm sorry about this. These calls always come at the right time. So the URL I've given you there summarizes some of the dilemmas that we are going to face in the digital society. Because remember, human beings came up with a self-inflicted deadline of 2030, that by 2030, in terms of our desired future, we want the world to be sustainable. And we know that we are missing many milestones along that path. So from a technology perspective, then you see how the engineers are projecting to 2030, what do we need to do in order to transition well to the digital society. Now, one of the trends which you notice, particularly in the AI field, is the use of edge computing. I think in the olden days, we used to call it nomadic computing, so nothing is really new. The concept of nomadic computing was to push processing power to almost to the user. So it doesn't emphasize the client-server model that we're used to. But if you think about the application of edge computing, we see it in terms of how AI is designed using deep reinforcement learning. So many people talk about deep reinforcement learning. And the question is, what really is it? How is it being used to design AI systems? And I try to explain it in a simple way that, first of all, deep reinforcement learning emerged from Markovian decision processes, which is a discipline from operations research. And then, of course, computer scientists, engineers now use deep reinforcement learning to design these AI systems. But most of the algorithms obviously came from different disciplines, whether it's mathematics, as I've indicated, Markovian decision processes then came from operations research. But the point of deep reinforcement learning is based on two key concepts. That first, you are at a particular position or a particular status. Like now you are sitting down. That is your position. It's a position of stability or equilibrium. Now, when you stand up to do something, that's action, right? And how we tend to behave again as human beings is that when you stand up to perform an action, you want the best reward. You cannot start an action if you are going to get punished for it. So if I leave the stage and I want to go and sit down there, if I walk around the room, you'll just say, this is a mad person. I would rather walk the shortest path. So then we talk about the shortest path algorithm. So in terms of deep reinforcement learning, we are saying that because we cannot see very far into the future, and rarely we do, from the position where you are, you ask yourself, what is the best move from this particular position? So you make the move or you take the action that optimizes or maximizes your utility. All right, so if some of you have girlfriends and boyfriends, just think about the actions you used to take before you get a girlfriend or a boyfriend. You know, you have to take action. Those who could not talk, we had to tell them, you have to talk, or there will be an arranged marriage for you. There has to be action. So reinforcement learning is based on those two concepts. There is the position. If you don't do anything, nothing will happen. Then you have to take action, but when you take action, you have to your intention is to maximize the reward or the utility. So then now you see deep reinforcement learning algorithms based on status, action, and reward. So the point I want to make here is that if we are building AI systems, because we are saying that AI systems are intelligent systems, and we are busy feeding them information, we are building those GPTs, the small actions that we are doing are actually creating, improving the system, the underlying system. So when you create a GPT in ChatGPT, you are actually improving ChatGPT itself. You're making it better and better. But for them to be able to release, this text to video innovation 6 days ago, that came from the learning on how people are actually using, text, feeding the system text and improving the design So deep reinforcement learning, I think, as I've emphasized, is really based on status, action, and reward. And so from those three concepts, then deep reinforcement learning algorithms are built to support what we do. The example that is given in that common AI book is how we actually vacuum carpets. The way you move around with that machine explains very well what that idea of status, action, and reward is about. You move around from one position to another, trying to clear the dirt, and you want to be able to maximize your movement, from a particular position. So that's the concept of deep reinforcement learning. And the idea is we want to assess the utility of every action that we perform. So as we design those AI systems, that is really a very important aspect of it. Now, the other thing I want to emphasize is that, obviously, if you talk about these systems, then we have to think about what does the systems thinking school tell us about how we design these systems. So I started by saying that our interest should be on how to design work systems, so maybe digital work systems of the future. And the idea behind the work system, similar to how, for instance, physicists or chemists are interested in determining the smallest element. So if you are in high school, I'm sure you learned about the elements in the periodic table. Physicists are interested in the smallest atom, the smallest element. Now, in terms of the social world, enterprises, our interest is the work system, is the smallest element. So that when you join a company, you are given, a system is provided to you in terms of, for example, what processes are required for your work, what technology do you need, what strategy are you going to employ in order to perform your work. Every individual has that work system, even though it may not be formally defined like that. And so when you get a salary, it's also indicative where you fall within that system. All right? The last time I checked, in my work, for example, I don't approve any money. So it's already telling you where you are within the work system. So Stephen Alter then borrows this concept of the socio-technical system to explain to us how to think about the digital work system of the future and how we should be creating them. And so our interest, the reason I'm talking about this is my talk is linked to a research program that we are introducing to try and understand how to design better digital work systems of the future. Because we are saying that the environment has changed, and probably the enterprises that we currently have in terms of their structure are not fit for the digital society. Therefore, we should be designing different forms of work systems that are relevant for that specific digital society. So we have started a program. We have named it utafiti.app. Utafiti is simply a Swahili word which stands for research. And our interest is to be able to design those work systems of the future, but using artificial intelligence. We think this is important because as of now, nobody knows how to price AI systems, for instance. The pricing mechanism is not clear. So for example, if you want to use ChatGPT, you have to pay $20 for it. And that's just the pipeline, that's just the road. All right? If you want other forms of services, for example, for you to use software as a service platforms, you still have to pay an additional amount. For instance, VoiceFlow is a software as a service. Zapier, again, is an automation company, but it's a software as a service company. You still have to pay money, $50, $100, etc. So when you really think about it, it's a very arbitrary process of pricing. And currently, for instance, at Stanford University, they are also trying to understand the pricing mechanism of the digital society. So we think that through this program, we will be able to determine how should we actually price what we are calling digital products, digital assets, so that we understand what we are designing. And we are approaching it from this work systems perspective because in every enterprise there's an individual, because the individual is the smallest element in the enterprise. And so if you understand the work system of the individual, hopefully we'll be able to understand how the digital work system of the future is likely to be. We think that the enterprise will change. It will not be the way it is currently. So this is the type of work that you want to do in that program. And what we have since done is to, for example, come up with just a chatbot. I think Professor Marivati asked the other day whether we need chatbots. Do we need chatbots? Now, from a systems perspective, we think that that's almost a question which is irrelevant for now because it's already there. People are already using it. Like I said, every system has a history. Thank you. I will be done by then. Every system has a history. And so the chatbots are already there. They are already, some chatbots are already taking people's jobs. We have chatbots that do customer service. We have chatbots that do very complicated things in different enterprises. And so the question should be, how should we use these chatbots, which are AI-driven, in this new environment, the digital work system that we are talking about. So our interest in this research program is to use the concept of chatbots to understand the pricing mechanism of the digital society. And how we want to start the process is by looking at what researchers do. If you think about what you do every day, for example, I mean, just before I came here, I'd already finished reading 2 theses. It's very, very, it's boring work, actually. And so what should we be doing? Because the AI can actually read it now and give you a very good report, better than what you can write. And so the question is, you should be using your heuristic rules, you should be providing the AI with the rules to provide you with the report that you want. I think it is inevitable that it is going to do that. But our role should be to provide that knowledge to be able, so that it is able to serve our interests. I think the internet has just gone. I don't know why. I could have demonstrated it, but let me see. But the point of this chatbot exercise is, if you see this URL, what we are trying to create in that research program with a group of students, so far there are 10 master students and 4 PhD students. We just said, we know that there will be probably 1 billion chatbots in 5 years' time. And if we are talking about 1 billion or more chatbots, there has to be the infrastructure for it. We need to understand it because they'll become more and more complex. And so understanding and governing them will be a problem that we have to deal with. And so part of this program is long-term in nature. We want to be able to create a marketplace for these chatbots so that we understand how to price. That knowledge will help us to understand how to price digital assets. If you give me a few minutes, I'll just go online on my phone and I will show what I intended. But while I'm just getting online, within that platform that we are sort of building, our interest is to be able to completely automate what a researcher does by looking at the screen only. And it should be done by one person, not more than one. Because we are saying that if you're able to do, if your work is based on the computer, then what you're seeing in front of you, you should be able to use AI to actually help you do that. And so that's the intention of that particular research program. So if you look at, for example, what we are working on in terms of the submission process of papers, for example, we are using JotForm as a platform for designing interactive forms that are then automated using Zapier and VoiceFlow as software as a service platforms to help us build a completely interactive online form for submissions, for handling appointments by researchers. For example, I'm sure many of you are receiving calls from your students. We want to meet you to discuss your thesis. And we are saying that can now be done online using AI in combination with various software as a service platforms which are used for automation purposes. So if you scroll down, you will see that we try to completely automate the process and limit. In many conferences, when you go, you are told you should not, the length is 6,000, for instance. But now that can be controlled using AI. You don't need to tell anybody. Once they use the interactive form, it will only accept the length that is required, for instance, for that particular function. So our interest is, first of all, to look at how the researchers are working and what they do, because that's what we understand well at the university, and then push on to see how can that knowledge then be used to understand how digital products, which you find in those platforms, are priced, so that we don't just use arbitrary numbers, such as $20 for ChatGPT. So if somebody is in Central African Republic, is trying to get food, is paying the same amount of money as somebody in a first world. And it doesn't really make sense if if you think about it from that perspective. So this is where we talk about these chatbots being AI-driven, such as when you take an example like VoiceFlow, and when you're designing them, obviously it allows you to provide the knowledge base that you need for the task that you want to perform. So for instance, if you go within VoiceFlow, just as well as ChatGPT, it allows you to capture only the information or the knowledge base that you want for that specific task. And so we think that is already good enough in terms of helping us to do our work. So if you're doing a literature review, it means that your chatbot, you can basically create a chatbot to help you do that and capture all your literature within that chatbot. And that then can be, you can use that to do your work. That already is being done by very many people using not only ChatGPT, but also using software as a service platforms such as VoiceFlow. So in this example, then we are basically using VoiceFlow for that purpose to demonstrate this. I don't think I don't have internet, and so I hope that you can take some time and go into that site and just look at it. It's just an FAQ, a simple FAQ on digital governance to illustrate it, and we have basically fed it with the information that we want, so that it gives us only answers from there. But you can also change it to look at information from other sources, because obviously the software as a service platforms are built on top of AI pipelines such as ChatGPT. So you can also allow it, maybe you tell it 40% check other sources apart from these sources that I have provided you. Thank you very much.
Professor Chara, thank you very much. This was really extremely informative, exciting. Can I, while we have you here, use the opportunity to pose questions to you? Can I ask from the audience? Please.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Good morning. Thank you, Prof. Achara, for a very informative talk this morning. I think we are all re-energized and we're ready to get back into our spaces of trying to be digital. Maybe 2 comments or 1 comment. I think, okay, let me start by saying this. We know organizations are very sort of like military-based, and how they are designed, they are very authoritative with top management usually telling operational and dictating operational needs, and from top down instead of bottom up. Now, how do we plan workplaces of the future if the structure has always been that type of a military sort of type authority, as compared to where we want to move as a society, where people are free to do what they want, free to do things at their own time, and just overall work-life balance with a lot of more freedom and movement. That's my first comment question. Number two is about you talked about the monetization of AI, that we still have to pay for it. Now, my question on that is that even though technology is highly subsidized by governments and we happen to still be paying so much for it, should now the shift not be that for the fact that government is so involved in how technology, rather it dictates also how technology functions in society, shouldn't we as users now, because we are indirectly or directly through taxes subsidizing them, shouldn't we now be more involved in how it is or how it should behave in terms of helping us? Because currently the worry is that technology is doing more damage than good, especially AI, because it has rendered some creative spaces sort of obsolete. Like you've just showed that animation, a lot of animators now are going to be out of work because of what AI can do. So should it not be focused on other areas of society instead of the so-called soft skills that they can take away from people, instead of other complex type of systems that need to be there in society, and we are not doing that? So those two comments, thank you.
That's a mouthful.
There's somebody behind there, I don't know if you want. Okay, I want to say that I don't really have the answers. We are seeking to understand some of these things. For example, the first one, where you talk about the top-down. Yes, okay, it's inevitable that there has to be control in any environment. It is normally said that in an economy, immediately you greet somebody, there was already a transaction. In other words, there is a connection. So when you talk about digital economy or even a marketplace, it's an interconnection of these various transactions. And immediately you start seeing transactions, there is always a need for how do you control what happens there? Because really, when we talk about freedom, freedom is something that we desire, but we know that immediately you connect with somebody, that freedom is not there anymore. And so that's why when we are designing system, there has to be a control aspect. So the question is, and you bring it from how our organizations are structured, from that top-down model. And we have always taught strategy from that perspective. Strategy is like a war game. And so even in business schools, those business students are taught how to go to war. They are not told this is war, but strategy is from that particular perspective. But my comment is that the interest is about how to create control systems in an environment where there is interconnection. And so the systems perspective tries to incorporate both. So there is the top-down control aspect and the bottom-up building of systems, because you still have to, there are different levels, and you still have to understand how the system operates from the bottom up. That is not very clear in the current structures of enterprises. Managers or CEOs, many of them basically back instructions. But the intention of the control system is for the manager to be able to receive signals. But the signals are coming from the bottom. When you receive a signal, then you are able to determine how to change the behavior of the system. So I think that mechanism of how to receive signals from the bottom up is still a problem for many organizations. The other thing about, I think monetization is what we are focusing on right now, Dr. Mampilo. The point again is, technology will take people's jobs. We tend always to think that it won't, but it does take jobs. It helps us to to improve the environment, and hopefully, there are new jobs that are actually created. If you go back, almost 30 years ago, when Amazon was created, there are many enterprises that are now extinct, but were very dominant in 1994, 1995. They've gone out of the system. The question then is, if we are talking about creatives, as an example, their jobs are being taken. I think the question we should be asking is, what should they now be doing? A case like that happened in the US, I think a few months ago, in Hollywood. I mean, we see all the stars, but there's a lot of, the base is actually bigger than the stars. So the writers, the script writers, the photographers, they were on strike for months. And so they had to negotiate with the government and other people to assure their jobs, some type of assurance for some time, for them to transition, to understand the AI, to understand how their jobs are going to be affected. And so the government set aside, I think, about $1 billion to sort of, as a safety net. The point I'm making is, once technology happens in the environment and we can't avoid it, issues of ethics will arise, because ethics is about right and wrong. When technology takes the job away, that person is going to go hungry. And so that's where the governance, what does the government or the governance system do to be able to protect those who are affected? So it's always a negotiation, but knowing that technology will affect the environment, one of the effects is that there will be job losses. And so we need to redesign or reskill in a different way. Some of those jobs we don't even know. But certainly, there are some jobs that were there 30 years ago that are no longer here. And either some were retrained, some of them died because they couldn't fit, and that's unfortunate. But, the society has to keep on moving. I know that was a political answer. I can keep this.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. This is James Lintwani from Limpopo Collab at the University of Limpopo. Thank you, Prof, for such a presentation. Very insightful indeed. So as an AI addict, I do everything, and I've learned so many things in using AI, some of which I should have gone to university or some college to do. So what I want to ask is, according to you, how relevant it is in this day and age for one to do a university qualification or a college degree? Is it still relevant to complete those in the advent of the AI? Thank you.
Okay. I can see you want me to say it so that I don't have a job tomorrow. But the way I think about it is that AI is our creation. That's number one. And again, if you look at literature, for instance, human-computer interaction literature, and how they talk about how we interact with what we create. You people create software programs, for instance. It's your creation. And in a way, you sort of control it, because we are creating the AI, but there's somebody behind it. It may not be you, it may be Facebook, or it may be the owner of Facebook. But we are basically creating systems for us, for our own use. So human-computer interaction literature says that when we create an artifact, a technology artifact such as AI, if it starts to, we are the ones who welcome it in our lives. And we have already welcomed AI in our lives, even though now we want to reject it. Some people will reject it, but we have already welcomed it, and we are trying to understand the nature of this visitor who is in our house. So we have an old African adage that if somebody comes to visit you, they are only visitors for 3 days. after 3 days, you give them a djembe, they go to the farm, right? And therefore, we need to understand it. It is what we have created as human beings to help us do our work. And I think we still have power over it, and we can stop it anytime. The question is, who is controlling it? And so for many who are feeling jittery, is that this control is actually from a few companies. You have seen how governments are now coming in to try and regulate the sector. It's a response to a societal concern of what AI is doing. That's why, for instance, in Europe and the US, they're coming up with the AI Act. I think they've already come up with it in places like Japan. They're doing the same. I don't know how far we are here in South Africa and many other parts of Africa. There are movements to regulate AI. So regulation is basically about control. We have realized that it may go out of control. And if you look at even one product such as ChatGPT and how they have been moving from one version to the other, when they moved from version 3.5 to version 4, they were able to control version 4 using version 3.5. It is like a child being able to control an adult. And so that experiment in itself was already good. It means that even if the technology the AI becomes more and more intelligent, we have proven that you can actually change its behavior by using a lower version of it. In other words, it could be a version that we have control over, and not the one which is going to take over the world. So that's possible currently. But what it also means is that the lower version can actually instruct the advanced version to do something wrong. Again, that's something that we have to deal with. So I believe it is a problem of control. We still have a good grasp of it. We are seeking to understand it. And I think one way you see how we are addressing it is how governments are now coming in to try and regulate. Because when governments come in, they try to protect those who are vulnerable in the society. That's really the role of governance. So when the EU was coming up with those acts, it was to protect their own society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. I am conscious or mindful of the time. I'll allow one more question, a quick question. And if you can just restrict, this is a very important discussion. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and we've got other guests that we need to honor in terms of their presentations.
Okay. Good morning. Prof, I'm frustrated. I'm very frustrated because I'm in higher education. I've been in higher education my whole life. So this year, in April, the 26 universities will be graduating about 100,000 students, graduates, with qualifications of which more than 60% of them, jobs don't exist anymore. The slow pace of higher education to catch up. I mean, if you look at recruitment now, it's skills-based, not program-based. My question is, what advice do you give to someone in academic planning and curriculum development in higher education? Thank you.
I wish Dr. Olaipan would have come to help me with those answers about higher education, but I will comment this way. I know the other gentleman also asked about whether our degrees are worth anything now. I think for me, the point is that even the AI we are talking about, we are the ones who are giving it that information. The question is, if you have a computer science degree right now, is how can you use that knowledge with AI? And so even the agents that we are building is actually dependent on the degrees that we are giving, the knowledge that we are imparting to the students. If for an information systems person, part of what we are concerned with is how to design work systems, digital work systems. And you still need the fundamental knowledge. I think the idea is there is some fundamental knowledge that you require, which we are then using to build these systems that we are talking about. So in terms of fundamentals, I do believe that there is relevance for many of our degrees. I'm not talking specifically about the subjects or the modules. I think the subjects or the modules are a subject of, can be changed. But the question is, for instance, is physics important? And within physics, you'd find that there's fundamental knowledge that is required. In computer science, the same, I believe. In marketing, the same. So that fundamental knowledge will still remain core as the basis of who we are. And we then use this to build, to provide knowledge to the AI, which is then a tool for us to do our work. I tend to think that the AI as a tool, because we have always created these tools as human beings, whether it is how we came up with the fire to be able to, to cook food or boil food and even keep the food for longer. It was a way of us adapting to the environment. And I do believe that the AI can play a positive role in our lives if we control it well. So the governance of it should be strong. The fundamental knowledge that we provide is useful for building them to serve us. So the question should be, we should be building them to serve us. Thank you.